everyone. Good evening. Good evening. Natasha Pennycook here, registered psychotherapist and mental health advisor with Keep Six. Welcome, welcome, welcome. You are locked on to Connect the Six, where we, my co-host Rachel and I, we come together and we introduce you to amazing people in the community that are doing some fabulous things. And tonight is no exception. We are having Rhonelle Bruder. She's amazing. She's a founder of Project iRISE. She is a human trafficking survivor. She's going to tell us about her story. She is going to be telling us about all the great stuff that she is doing and continues to do for the community. So welcome, welcome, welcome. I see Rhonelle is here. We're just waiting for her to. So Rhonelle, how do you do this? Request to join, and then I will let you in. All right, so just waiting for Rhonelle to request to join. Did I miss it? Okay, great. Hey, Rachel, and everyone, Rachel is here as well, my lovely, beautiful co-host, and she is going to be here doing back end. If you have any in the chat, Rachel will see it. She will alert me to the questions are there. So just waiting for Rhonelle to pop on. And hey,
Hi.
there you are. Hey, it's so good to see you.
Yes, I know. It's been a while.
It has. It definitely has been a while. How are
Yes.
you doing to this evening?
Good, good.
Yeah? Okay, great. I was just letting people know that we're going to be having a great chat
Yes.
today. So definitely thank you for joining me. I know you've been super busy. I thought I've been busy, but girl, you've been busy.
We've all been busy, but I think that's
I
that's incredible, right? Like we're in a global
Yeah,
pandemic
yeah,
and we're still busy,
yes,
so we're
yes.
blessed.
You know what? Yeah, there's so much truth to that, that we are in a global pandemic and we are still being able to be so busy,
Yeah.
being able to start new projects,
Yes.
right? And I've seen you all over the news as well, so this has been amazing. So, yeah, do you want me to read your bio? Do you want to go ahead?
I'm like, you can go ahead. I don't know.
I know no one ever likes reading their own
Yeah.
bio, right? There's a thing
Yeah.
there. So everybody definitely put your hands together and welcome Rhonelle Bruder. She is a public speaker, an educator, an anti-trafficking advocate. Rhonelle works in the anti-human trafficking sector. And she's very informed by her own lived experience as a survivor of sex trafficking and formerly a homeless teen. Once a high school dropout, now Rhonelle holds both a bachelor's degree and a master's degree. And with her over 10 years of experience, she has experience working as a business analyst, a researcher, a project manager, a community outreach. I know you do some mental health advocacy as well, right? And recently you have been really working a lot with Six Kids Hospital in City of Toronto, Heal Trafficking for Human Trafficking and Child Exploitation. You have been on many TV appearances and media appearances, and recently you started your own non-for-profit called Project iRISE. So
Yeah.
everyone, welcome, 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 Rhonelle. It's great. It's
Thank
great to
you.
have you here. Yeah, definitely. Thank you for being here again. So yeah, let's jump right in because
Yeah.
we only have an hour, and I know you and I, we both like to talk. So
Exactly. And we have a lot to cover. So
and we have a lot to cover, and
yeah.
a lot to say, and a lot to let people know what's
Yes.
going on, right? So you, in your own words, tell us who you are and a little bit about you.
Yeah, so I think you did it so perfectly. So I feel like I can't live up to that. But I'm
Oh
a
gosh.
public speaker, advocate, consultant around gender violence, human trafficking, child sexual exploitation, and the founder and executive director of Project iRISE, which is a grassroots survivor-led non-for-profit organization that focuses on educating and empowering survivors of human trafficking and those at risk. And that's really, so I'm a mother, sorry, I'm a mother to a teenager who just started university this
Oh
year.
well.
So
Oh
I mean,
well.
yeah, I have a lot, a lot going on.
Definitely a lot going on. So I know that you talk very openly about parts of your
Mhm.
past, right? And you definitely mentioned, like in your bio, that your past definitely informs the work that you do.
Yes.
Right. So tell us a bit about your past.
Yeah, so I kind of entered into, I think, the anti-trafficking space a little differently than most people who are survivors of trafficking have, because
Mm,
my experience was many years ago, 20 years ago, when there wasn't this awareness on human trafficking. The language of human trafficking didn't even exist when I was younger. And so girls who got into trapped into this life, they basically just had to find their own way out. They either had to
yeah.
like, run away from their PAMs, or they just had to somehow get out of it, or they didn't, right? I mean, that's the
Hmm.
reality, and some still are sort of trapped.
Yes.
And
True.
so I was able to sort of get out and, slowly start the process of rebuilding my life and entered into working within the healthcare sector. But it was
Mm,
that I started volunteering. I started doing a lot of just like outreach and volunteer with at-risk youth. And I think it was that really sort of drew me back into my experiences as a child, because I was meeting these young girls in particular, and I
yeah.
kept seeing myself. I kept seeing
Wow.
that 16, 17-year-old Rhonelle, and I thought, oh my God, like if I could tell them what I know now, you know what I mean? Because I
Yeah.
could see
Yeah.
they're hard headed. They think they know everything, but it's really because they're hurting. Like you just see it and you just want to kind of shake them and say, no. And then
Yeah.
that's really when I started to say, I have these lived experiences, and
Mhm.
they're somewhat unique in the sense that I've sort of lived in these two different worlds, the world of what we call like the street life, the game, but then also very much like the normal, like 9 to 5 kind of life. And so
Mhm.
being able to sort of live in those worlds and being able to sort of transition from one to the other, what have I learned? What can I tell these other young people? And what can I tell them to help prevent them from going down sort of that same path that I did? And that was really what sort of drew me to saying, you know what, I want to do this work. I want to be in this anti-trafficking space, just to,
Mhm.
really to support the at-risk youth out there. And then also people who are survivors and have lived that, who
Yeah.
end up feeling trapped, end up
Yeah.
getting in this cycle of like not being able to sort of get out and not being able to rebuild their lives. And so, what did I learn? Like maybe what are sort of the
Mhm.
lessons that I had learned, or things that I can sort of do that maybe to help them. So I kind of had a
Mhm.
weird, I guess, pathway into this space.
Well, you know what I like about that is that you've had that experience on both sides, because some people have experience only on one side and have this idea that
Mm.
the other side is so much better, right? Like the
Yeah.
grass is greener kind
Mm.
of idea. And you've had both sides and you've been able to live in both sides. So
Mm.
you have more of, I guess, a balanced perspective. Right? Yeah, yeah, I like that. You
Okay.
didn't think about that, right?
Okay.
You didn't think about this.
Didn't
Yeah,
think
yeah.
of it that way,
But
but okay.
but no, I mean, what I mean really, by the balanced perspective is that you can be in one life and still being able to work with people in the other life and
Mm.
have that understanding of both and being able to say, okay, now I am the executive director, the founder, CEO of this amazing project, and I'm working with individuals who are in this life. And you've also gone to school, you've gone through the educational system and all
Mm.
of that, right? So you have that
Right.
understanding of what it could take to get people out of some of the more unfortunate circumstances that individuals may be in,
Yeah.
and also how to navigate getting to somewhere else because you've been able to do that.
Yeah. And it's not easy, and
Yeah.
that's not easy, and it's not a
No.
just like you don't know what you don't know, right? So it's kind of like when you have someone that can say to you like, this is how, like, just doing something like a university application, like
Yeah.
just like, you know what I mean, like
Exactly.
that to some people might seem so simple, but I can tell you that is really hard if you have no idea how to do that, and it's
Yeah.
very
Yeah.
overwhelming and intimidating. Yeah.
Yes, exactly. And it's true. The intimidatingness of
Yeah.
it can be one of those things that pulls people out of it because may
Yeah.
feeling like I don't fit here, I don't belong, I'm not good enough. All of
Yes.
those things
Yes.
can come up, especially for individuals who may have been treated involved, or maybe this idea that there's so much stigma
Hmm.
against them that, right? Why should I even try?
Yeah.
But you're able to be that amazing example of look what you can do when you do try.
I hope so. Yeah, I hope. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. No, it's amazing. Um, so you mentioned that, that human trafficking is an exploitation of vulnerability. And I think I got this
Hmm.
from one of I know you were on a couple of news programs last week, and then there's also from your website. I know that you mentioned that. Can
Yeah.
you explain that to us, what that means? The
Yes.
exploitation of vulnerability.
Yes, to me, sort of in the simplest form, that's what human trafficking is. And I'm talking about sex
Yeah,
trafficking, just to clarify, because there's different forms of human trafficking. And
yeah,
so when you think of sort of what are vulnerabilities, there's, internal vulnerabilities, like someone who has a low self-esteem, somebody who has low self-worth or body image issues, right? These are vulnerabilities that I would say 99% of youth have, right? Like across
Yeah.
the board, boys, girls, everyone has it. I had that, you had
Yes.
that, we all have that.
Oh yeah, we all do.
So
Yep.
that's a vulnerability to exploitation, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because
Mm-hmm.
that's that, not feeling like you're worthy, you're enough. So when someone comes in your life and tells you that you're beautiful and that you're special, they're just telling you the
Yeah.
things that you want to hear. But
Yep.
then we have external vulnerability. So that's, youth who are homeless, street involved in the criminal justice system, youth who there's, parents maybe struggling with mental health, addiction, there's sexual
Mm-hmm.
violence, there's physical
Mm-hmm.
violence in their history. There's all these other layers. So when you have those type of external sort of environmental vulnerabilities and you combine that with those internal ones, I mean, you have a high risk young person. So either like separately you're at risk, but when you
Mm-hmm.
combine them, and this is what we're seeing a lot with youth, is they have both of those vulnerabilities. And traffickers, and I would say predators in general, so
Mm-hmm.
any sort of predator, is they're very sort of apt at sort of like getting to know somebody, getting in someone's life, building that trust, and then getting that
Mm-hmm.
information out of them. Sort of like, what is it? But not in a way that's inquisitory or, what's going on in your life, but in a way that comes across as if they really genuinely care and they want to know what's happening. And
Mm-hmm.
that's also something that's very, everyone wants to be heard.
Yeah.
Everyone wants someone to hear them, right? We're all like inside, just
Mm-hmm.
listen to me, listen. And if you have
Yeah.
someone that's going to just sit and listen to you and sort of answer to any problem you have, and if you say you need this, they got the answer, they can help you. It's
Mm-hmm.
it's very easy to see how a young person can get lured and groomed by a trafficker.
Yeah, yeah. And you said that so well because there's so much truth in that. We all have these needs. I always tell my clients,
Mm-hmm.
we all have a need to be seen, heard, validated,
Yes.
appreciated, and loved,
Yeah.
right? And if you think about that, if a trafficker is able to, well, able,
Yeah.
right? If a trafficker sees that, they're so, what they tend to do then is manipulate that.
Yeah.
So then the exploitation of vulnerability goes through manipulation
Yes.
to give a young person what they need, because there's
Mm-hmm.
all those needs,
Yes.
loved, appreciated, all of that,
Yes.
and they're able to give them what they need. So then person having that feeling that, oh, this person is giving me what I need,
Yes.
therefore I should trust them.
Yes. and that's
Yeah.
and that's sort of that process of exploitation and how it happens, and it can
Yes.
happen to
Yes.
youth from all backgrounds. So it can happen
Yeah.
to a young person, in Oakville and Kitchener and Burlington. It can happen to a young person, Jane and Finch and Scarborough. It can happen to,
Mm-hmm.
it doesn't matter sort of what race you are, it doesn't matter your
Mm-hmm.
socioeconomic background.
Mm-hmm.
However, we know that Black youth, Indigenous youth, LGBTQ plus youth, they're at much higher risk for being exploited.
Okay. Okay. And that's an interesting fact.
That's a fact.
Right? That's a
It's a fact.
fact.
That's a
Okay.
fact. Let's say that. Yeah,
Okay.
it's a
Okay.
fact.
Yeah. 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 And you know why I think that's so interesting? Because it goes along with the acceptance and the idea that if community is not accepting or their social circles are not accepting, then that youth get lured in faster.
Yes. Yeah.
And then if you look at the youth that are being lured in faster, they're individuals that identify as being a person of color or a BIPOC youth.
Yeah. And I always say for young people, particularly very marginalized and disenfranchised young people,
Yeah.
girls end up oftentimes being exploited sexually, but boys end up going into gangs. So they're all looking for the same thing. Young girls are
Yeah.
looking for that feeling of protection and love, but so are boys. But it just
Yeah.
ends up they
Yeah.
going into sort of a different way of exploitation because the gang is a
Yes.
surrogate family. That's what gangs
Mm-hmm.
are to young
Yeah.
boys,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
pimps, and that end
Mhm.
up being a surrogate father.
Right.
So
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah. And I love the way you put it. You explain that because you explain it in a way that we get it
yeah,
and we understand that. We understand wanting,
yeah,
a longing for, belongingness.
yeah.
All right. Yeah. There's another stat that you talk about how human trafficking is the fastest growing crime in the world. Can you explain that?
Yeah, so I think I mean second to drug trafficking is human trafficking, and as far as just a business sense, I guess human trafficking is just profitable. It's very profitable for traffickers, for organized crime entities, because if you have drugs, if you have, let's say, like a kilo of cocaine, you sell it. That's it. That's done. You've made
Right.
your money. You can't make more money off that kilo. If you have a
Right.
human being, you can sell them over and over and over. Literally, you can sell them until they're dead. I mean, this is what we see happening. And so
Yeah.
for these people, it's that human being ends up being more valued because just the fact that they're able to sort of resell them and make more money off of them.
Right.
And then, I mean, if you think about even sort of the aspect of getting caught, if you're in a car and you have 2 or 3 girls and the police pull you over, I mean, how are they going to know these girls are victims of trafficking? Right? There's not necessarily a sign that says this is a victim of trafficking. And so it's much easier to sort of move around with, doing that kind of crime. Whereas if you have drugs on you, please come to your car. If they even suspect there's something, like they're bringing the canines and then you're,
Right.
so,
Yeah.
so it's a little bit different. So it's actually, I mean, and I've talked to men who are former pimps and they've said that to me, that they pimped because it was easier to pimp than sell drugs.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
Much less dangerous, they said. Yeah.
Much less dangerous. Okay. Okay. That is, it's sad.
Yeah.
Right. It's sad because I know that I've seen different posts that people are talking how human trafficking, sex trafficking, it's modern day slavery.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And that just the idea of that there we have these young girls. And for example, the police stop them and these girls might think, okay, here's my chance to get out.
Mm-hmm.
But how did you prove it?
Yeah. So there's one thing I just want to say something.
Yeah.
That term, actually, I find it problematic. I'm just going to say
okay.
that.
Tell me which term. Yes. Okay. Tell me, because I'm learning here too.
No, and people say this all the time, so it's not just you. So they say human trafficking is modern day slavery.
Yeah.
I don't think it is. And so the reason why I'll say, I'm going to protest against that. The reason why I think is because slavery existed. It was a racial discrimination. It was based on race. It was that concept that by how you were born as a Black person, you and I were inferior. We were less than. We were half a human being or a quarter of a human being, meaning that once you were born into slavery, you died into slavery, your kids were slaves. Yeah. Sex trafficking, human trafficking is not something you're born into necessarily. You don't live it the rest of your life. You don't die. Your kids don't become victims of sex trafficking just because you were one. So I don't know. When people say that modern day slavery, I think they're horrific in both senses. They're both horrific. But I do feel that there needs to be a little bit of a differentiator between slavery, which was so based on, the Atlantic after slave trade and Black people and Black bodies, and then what we're seeing today.
Yeah, no, I love that. Thank you for that, because I think there needs to be clarification, because people use these terms and they become social jargon. Yeah. Right? That people always use. And I say this a lot of time being in a psych world where people are like, oh yeah, I'm so OCD. But I'm like, well, do you really know what that means? Yeah. And I think this is also being in the field and speaking in the field and also having lived experience. It's so important for us as the experts and professional to set the record straight. So thank you for that. No.
I mean, I've even said it myself. So just like full disclosure, I've even said it. But then after I said it, I kind of, it was one of those things where like, it didn't sit well with me. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, thank you. Thank you for that. You have a video on your website that's called What is Sex Trafficking? Right? And you speak of the role of social media in human trafficking. And especially nowadays, especially with the can I say this, the advent of COVID? Because we've been in it we've been in it for like ever. Yes. How has that exacerbated, and how has social media definitely impacted the human trafficking world?
Yeah, so I think so social media, I mean, there's many great things about social media.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, we're using social media right now to have this conversation. Yeah, so we're using the platform to educate.
So there's many good things about it, but it's that sort of availability of people. We're able to connect with people, and there's such anonymity online, right? You don't really know who you're talking to. You don't know what's really going on. And young people, they love social media. They're on it all the time. This is their form of social interaction. It's not like when you and I were kids, we just went out to the mall and hung out or something. They go online, they go on TikTok. But also young people are oversharing. So they're online and they're talking about everything, hashtagging everything. And so if someone has, nefarious intentions and they want to go on and connect with a young person, it's pretty easy to scroll through someone's feed and learn a lot of information about them and just sort of send that message. Hey, how's it going? Start that kind of connection. And I think young people, they're just, they're not necessarily cognizant that other person on their end may have some bad, ill intentions against them. And if the person's nice, and especially if they're flattering you, they're telling you you're
Yeah.
sexy and you're beautiful and you're this.
Mm-hmm.
It's easy to kind of fall into that and not realize that this is someone who has intentions of exploiting you. And so I
Yeah.
think back in the day, or at least, when I was a kid, so
Mm-hmm.
traffickers, they would go to the Greyhound station. They would just hang out around the Greyhound station because that's where the
Okay.
homeless kids, that's where the runaways were.
Right.
Or they would
Right.
go to the homeless shelter and they'd have cigarettes. And they'd say, hey, you want to smoke?
Okay.
You want to smoke? Right? Like that's how they would go and
Yeah.
engage with
Yeah.
vulnerable youth.
Okay.
But now
Yeah.
they don't have to. They just sit at home
Right.
online and just send out a bunch of messages to a bunch of young kids. And now it's so much easier for them too to connect with young people.
Oh wow. Okay. So what advice do you have for any youth that may be watching?
Yeah, well, I even my daughter, I always tell her,
Yeah.
you don't know, like if they're not your friends, like if
Hmm.
these are your personal friends, if you don't know them, don't add them. You know what I mean? Keep your profile private on every
Right.
single, social
Yeah.
media
Yeah.
platform. I think a lot of them are defaulted to being public, but you can go in and you can set it as private. And the only
Right.
people that you invite should be the people that you know personally, not a friend of a
Right.
friend of a friend. Like
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
have to
Yeah.
know that person,
Yeah.
and you just have to be careful what you're sharing. I always say, like,
Hmm.
would you want your mom, your dad, or like your grandma to see that? Like, think about that.
Yeah.
Because once it's online forever. And
It's
we're also
forever.
seeing sort of that coercion and manipulation, but also a lot of times what they're doing is if a young person maybe sends a photo of themselves, like, topless or any sort of provocative sexual photo, they can use
Yeah.
this against them. Say, listen, if you don't do what I want, like, I'm going to expose this. So
Oh
there's so many
wow.
different,
Yes.
tactics that they can use to kind of exploit young people.
Yeah. So I know we might have some parents on here
Mm,
of teens like you.
yeah.
What advice do you have for parents who are listening,
I think with
especially in terms
parents,
of social media?
yes, it's, with social media, just being present, being on top of it, knowing sort of like what social media platforms your children are on, sort of minding them, having these conversations with them about being careful
Yeah.
and not to trust anybody. But just, I think in general, having conversations with your young people about sex trafficking, but also just about healthy relationships, like things like
Mm-hmm.
boundaries. How do you
Yeah.
set and build boundaries? What does that
Yeah.
mean? And what happens if someone crosses
Yeah.
those boundaries? Or what is consent? Because I think a lot of times people, like
Mm-hmm.
the idea that consent is not something that's static. I mean, I can consent to something today and then tomorrow change my mind, and that's okay.
Right.
So I think,
Yeah.
having these kinds of conversations with young people on a regular basis is really important.
I love that. I love that. And the thing is boundaries goes into consent and vice versa, right? So
Yeah.
I think any parent that's on, if you have questions for now, definitely get
Yeah.
them in the chat. Rachel's there. She will field them. Also, parents are on. This may be a live that you want to sit down and watch with your child after. Right, because the idea of boundaries about no, and boundaries are so interesting because there's all kind of boundaries.
Yeah.
There's time, personal boundaries, but also emotional boundaries
Yeah.
and safety boundaries, right? Having these conversations and also recognizing how you can be that model for your child. So being able to sit there and talk about it,
Yeah.
start the conversation, but also making sure that you have an understanding of what boundaries are and how you're participating in boundaries, and then
Yeah.
also consent as well. So right, these are great tips. Thank you so much
Mm-hmm.
for that. Um, let's talk about COVID because COVID has had impacts
Mm-hmm.
on literally every single thing,
Yes.
right? How has COVID impacted human trafficking?
Yeah, so as far as the numbers, as far as so we have a Canadian national hotline run through the Canadian Center
Okay.
to End Human Trafficking.
Okay.
There hasn't been necessarily, they can't sort of connect an uptick due to COVID-19, but I think if we
Okay.
just think of other aspects of what we've seen happen through COVID-19, we know there's been an increase
Yeah.
in domestic violence.
Yes.
We know that there's an increase in substance abuse, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that's
Mm-hmm.
alcoholism, those things.
Mm-hmm.
So young people are now stuck at home in potentially violent homes where
Mm-hmm.
there could be physical sexual violence going on, homes where they're not safe. And we also have economic factors because people have lost
Yep.
their jobs. Parents have
Yes.
lost their jobs, their
Yes.
livelihood. And so we
Yeah.
have situations where young people are now at greater risk, I would say, than
Mm-hmm.
pre-COVID. And another thing I think for me that I also consider is what's going to happen after COVID? Like, what's that
Mm-hmm.
after? How many young people are now going to be coming from homes where there's been violence happening? They haven't been safe, and there's
Mm-hmm.
financial insecurity, and now they're going to be even more vulnerable to traffickers. So right now, today, we know there's increased
Right.
vulnerability, but that may go on for another couple of years just because of these
Yes.
after effects of this pandemic.
Yes, yes. And it's so true because there are going to be after effects of
Yeah.
the pandemic, right? I think people are starting to understand that. And I think people like you and I,
Yeah.
especially in the fields that we work in, we've been saying this for a while,
Yeah.
that there is going to be definite after effects of this pandemic. And I'm starting to see that now just from a mental health
Mm.
perspective.
I can imagine. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you have people who are struggling with, as you even economic, right? Even
Yeah.
food security or food
Yeah.
insecurity, just from having from April or March till now. So you think about the mental health impact and implications that has for years down the road about housing and
Mm.
schooling and these different things, right? So there's definitely
Yeah.
going to be an impact. I don't know, post-COVID impact that we are not even aware of yet,
Yeah.
right? And it is going to hit. It is going to hit. So I think that we need to start doing what we can to get ready for it because I think it's going to be big and huge, and there's going to be so much demand there for very skilled and professionals and expertise to be able to go out there and help. And the thing is, those of us in the community and working within the community are going to be at the most vulnerable because of different factors
Mm.
that you mentioned.
Yeah. No, I think this
Yeah.
is where so that education and awareness is so
Mhm.
important. Having that, again, having these conversations, but also having resources, because the reality is
Yeah.
not every youth comes from a home that they have parents. Let's be honest, that are able to even
Yeah.
do these kinds of things. So we
Yes.
need to, as a
Yeah.
community, make sure we have resources available. So when we identify these youth that are particularly at high risk, we're able to
Mhm.
intervene. We're able to get them services, get them the supports that they need before they get exploited.
Exactly, exactly. And that's why community supports are so
Yeah,
important because if you can do instead of prevention, which is kind of like a Western model, and sorry, instead of cure, which is a Western
yeah,
model, can we start doing prevention?
yeah,
Putting things in place where youth have places to go and people to talk to, start doing the prevention instead of the cure. Let's prevent these things from even happening so that we have less to cure later on.
yes, yes,
Right?
yeah.
I wanted to, someone, Long Live the North had a comment saying, it's also hard telling people that, excuse me, that are living with these issues about boundaries. Excuse me.
Mhm.
So, yes, yes, for sure. It's definitely hard for some people to understand boundaries.
Yeah,
It's hard for people to recognize that they're not using boundaries appropriately. And I think it's still important to have the conversations
yeah. No,
and kind of
yeah.
leave it there.
Because I think
Go
these are
ahead.
things that like you don't just learn them once and then that's it. Like, learning how to build boundaries. I'm still learning this. Like, you know what I
Oh,
mean?
yeah.
This is like you constantly have to learn because this is intimate relationships, this is platonic relationships, this is family. See, these are kinds of things that I feel like you're always learning about consent and boundaries and healthy relationships and what you're comfortable and not comfortable with. It shouldn't be a, one and done type of thing. So
Exactly. And I definitely echo that. I'm still learning about boundaries. I teach boundaries and I'm still learning about boundaries.
yeah.
I'm learning that there's so many different kinds of boundaries and different ways that we can put boundaries in our lives. And
Yeah.
it's something that we definitely have to do. We may do it very well with some people in our lives and not very well with other people in our lives.
Exactly.
So it's a continuous learning process. So Rhonelle, let's talk about Project iRISE. It's kind of like your second child.
It is. I feel it is my second child as far as like the time and work I put into it.
So yeah, where did the idea come from?
So as soon as I sort of entered in this space and I started doing this work, I knew that I wanted to start my own nonprofit. I knew that I had sort of a vision of services and things that I wanted to do, and that I would probably have to do my own thing to do it. But of course, I didn't have the time, or I didn't have the
Yeah,
capacity or the time to do it. And then COVID hit,
yeah,
and suddenly I had a lot of time in my hands. So it's kind of like, if not now, when, right? Like, let's do this.
yes, yes.
And Project iRise is really that concept of how can we help people who have, been through exploitation, been through trafficking, really rise, right? It's like my Angelou poem,
Mm-hmm.
Still I Rise,
All
right? So it's
right.
about rising to your full potential. And a lot of times survivors, and I know this for myself personally, there's so many
Mm-hmm.
struggles in rebuilding your life. There's so many
Mm-hmm.
challenges and barriers that you face. Oftentimes people just give up, and they
Yeah.
kind of go back into that cycle of re-exploitation. But with supports, again, community support, with
Yeah.
encouragement, with mentorship, with that, I mean, you can help somebody rebuild the life. You can provide them the tools that they need. And so our focus is on education. I
Yeah.
believe education, to me, that's really what changed the trajectory of my life, was going back to school. So we want to,
Mhm.
we have like services, workshops, skills training, and then empowerment. So really empowering survivors to be what they want and do what they want in their life. I think oftentimes people feel like when someone's a survivor, that title defines them. Like this person's a
Yes.
survivor. That's all they are. Like, no, you're
Mhm.
not. You're a mother, you're a daughter, you're a sister. You could be a nurse, a teacher. Like a survivor is an experience that you've had. You survived something, but that is not the extent of who you are and what you have to offer the world.
Yes. 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 Oh my goodness. I love that. I love that.
Mm,
And you know what happens a lot of times when we have these labels of survivor, what we think about is kind of the opposite, that we have to stay within victimhood.
yes.
Right? So I love that what you said about Project iRISE, because it's the idea that you don't have to continue to wear that label
Mm,
of victimhood.
mm,
You don't have to stay within the mindset of victimization. That there are tools, there's educational platforms, there are
yeah.
organizations that can help you rise, and I love what you're doing, especially the empowerment piece.
Yes. Yeah.
Right? It's such a physical and mental empowerment that I love. I
Yes.
love that.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you started during COVID.
Yeah.
Okay, you gave birth to
Oh my
iRise
God.
during COVID. And how has it been so far?
Yeah, it's been a journey. No, but it's been great. You know what? I'm so blessed because I really reached out to the community, and just as far
Mm,
as building that team. So first it was building my board of directors, and I have an
nice.
amazing, incredible board of directors. I have an amazing project team. I have volunteers who've committed so much time to help really build this organization. And so we wanted to start to create our services, and our main sort of service is focused on, again, education, empowerment, and mentorship, and that's what
Mm-hmm.
we're going to be rolling out in 2021. But we
Okay.
have started a service already in 2020, and that
Mm,
is branding tattoo removal.
okay. Yeah.
And that's been, I mean, it's overwhelming response from the community, from the
Okay.
survivor community with that. We've
Yeah.
already been able to help many young women, and we'll continue to help them. And we started a GoFundMe campaign, and it's been, yeah.
So tell us more about this program, because
Yeah.
this is one of your like flagship programs
Yeah.
right now.
Yes, yes. So brain tattoo removal. So what a lot of people
Yeah.
don't know is that victims of sex trafficking are often branded by their trafficker. So this can be either forced, so they can be coerced to do it, like, oh, if you love me, you'll do it, that kind of thing. It's
Mm.
oftentimes his name, so it's his name, it's a symbol that, relates
Wow.
to him. It's sometimes even like barcode, symbol, some things like that
Wow.
you'll have.
Yeah.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
so after this victim is now a survivor and they're away from their trafficker and they're trying to rebuild their life, they still have this physical reminder on their body. I mean, they
Mhm.
physically have something every day that reminds them of
Yeah.
that trauma, that pain, that abuse. And
Yeah.
removing something like that can be very expensive, obviously.
Mhm.
And so a lot of survivors can, and so it's something that they often feel they just have to live with the rest of their life. And so we
Mhm.
wanted to, really do something about that. And because that to me is about empowerment, right? Like, how do you move
Mhm.
forward and feel empowered if you have something physically on your body, kind of
Right.
keeping you back, right? Into
Right.
that. And so we found an amazing community partner, Notice Boutique, which I think you
Mhm.
interviewed.
Yeah, yeah,
Yes.
she was on. So
Was
Lashana was on
yes,
last week, and we had
yes,
a great conversation
yes.
where I think we like went over time, and for some reason Instagram let us. But yeah, we had an amazing
Yes.
conversation last week with Lashana. Yeah.
Yes. So the Shauna, so we, partnered with her as a community partner. So she provides that really safe, inclusive space for our
Yes.
survivors to go in and have their
Yes.
tattoos and have their branding removed. And also provides us a discount for our clients that are coming in. And so
Beautiful.
we're like, great, okay, now we have a community partner, but how are we going to fund
Yes.
this? So
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
then really my mind was like, okay, let's do a GoFundMe. I mean, people do GoFundMe's for everything, so
Yes.
might as well do one for this. And
Yeah.
so I started it, and initially I think the goal was $10,000 to help 20 women remove their branding tattoos, with the
Okay.
idea it costs approximately $500 per tattoo.
Wow. Yeah.
So I started it, and it was very lukewarm response. Like, I think I had like $300 that I raised, and that was all my family.
Mm.
So right, like, so then I
Yeah.
was like, what am I gonna do? And I kind of like sat with it for a minute, and I was like, oh, I was like really disappointed. But then I was like, you know what, Rhonelle, you have to do what you know what to do, is go into the community,
Go
reach
into the
out and ask for
community.
help. Ask for
Yes.
help. Never ever be too prideful to ask for help. And so that's what I
That
did. right?
Yeah, that in and of itself is such a message right there.
Yes,
Don't be too prideful
never.
to ask for help. Don't be too scared. Don't think you're going to look
Yeah.
stupid or foolish or whatever. Asking for help is actually what brings community together.
Exactly. And so I
Mm-hmm.
reached out to you, reached out to a
Yes.
bunch of people and created a team we call iRISE ambassadors. And we asked everyone to join in and to try themselves to raise $500 with the idea that would be the approximate cost of one tattoo removed. And I
Yeah.
can tell you every person that I asked said yes, hands down, or they couldn't because just timing wise they couldn't,
Yeah, of
they
course.
donated, or they shared it on their platform. So I was
Yeah.
just so overwhelmed at just like the support we got from the community. And I mean, we've
Yes.
surpassed our goal. Our goal was
Yeah.
10,000. I think we're at like 10,500 as of right now. So we're gonna
Yeah.
try to get to 11,000 by the time
Yeah.
this is done. And
Yeah.
just also there's been so much awareness because every
Yeah.
time you share it on your platform or another
Mm-hmm.
iRise ambassador does, someone
Mm-hmm.
says, wait a minute, like what is this branding removal tattoo? Like, what is this
Yes.
branding? So we're also
Yes.
creating this conversation about
Yeah.
trafficking, about the
Yeah.
things that survivors have to endure.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I think just the awareness piece, because having the education is so important. You can't start the education without the awareness that is something to be educated
Yes.
about. So being able to have that awareness, being an iRise ambassador has been great because I've been learning a lot
Oh,
about branding tattoos, right? And like I think you and I had a conversation and you were telling me about even the fact how it differs, removing the tattoos from melanated skin.
yes.
This is something I was like, what?
Yes. And
And
so,
how does not
yeah.
a yeah, go ahead, go ahead.
So yeah, and so that speaks to sort of Lashana is
Yeah.
a Notice Boutique is that
Yeah.
the form of removal she uses is a saline tattoo removal.
Yeah.
And that saline tattoo removal is more effective for melanated skin. So it's better for all skin types. Whereas laser tattoo removal really only works for Caucasian, sort of like white skin. And so we know in our community that the survivors that are going to come to us are of all nationalities, indigenous,
Yeah.
black, white. So if I'm going to offer a service and Project iRise is going to offer a service, it has to be inclusive and it has to be able to support everybody.
Yeah, and that's amazing. The inclusivity is so important because we talk about being inclusive, but we have to look through right across the gamut
Mm-hmm.
of being inclusive, right?
Yeah.
Not only from one lens, but really being able to understand that if you're saying that the majority of individuals who fall victim to the human trafficking are from the BIPOC community, then if you're going to do tattoo removal for those who have been involved with human trafficking, then you have to also look at that demographic as well,
Yeah.
right? And especially understanding melanated skin, we scar easier, and there's all these different things. So you have to be able to meet your clients where they're at, and
Yeah.
that's amazing.
Yeah.
That's amazing. Oh my goodness. You also said you have some programs that you're rolling out in
Yeah.
2021. Do you want to give us a sneak peek of what some of those
Yes.
are?
So really, so I guess the big program that we're putting together is our
Yeah.
survivor leadership. And that really
Okay.
speaks to what I was saying earlier, where, we really feel that survivors should be leading the anti-trafficking space, the anti-trafficking movement. They're not just their story. They're
Mm.
more than that. You know what I mean? There's so
Yeah.
much more. I've met some of the smartest, most capable women that were survivors that have so many gifts and so many talents to share to the world, but it was just
Yeah.
untapped because no one
Yep.
recognized it, no one saw it, right? So they just sat
Yep.
there dormant. And so we want to
Yes.
really be able to, provide them with the education, the training, the networking, the connections, the
Mm-hmm.
community,
Mm-hmm.
just sort of build
Mm-hmm.
them up so they can. I mean, there's women who reach out to me, they want to do advocacy, they want to work,
Yeah.
within legislation and policy. They want to be a
Yes.
public speaker or facilitator, do
Yeah.
training, anti-trafficking
Yeah.
training. And maybe they
Yeah.
want to do research and they want to sort of build sort of more of that evidence-based frameworks in anti-trafficking
Mm-hmm.
service. But
Mm-hmm.
they need help, they need support to be able to do that kind of stuff. So really that's what survivor leadership is creating for that
Okay.
next generation of survivor leaders.
Oh, amazing, amazing. So with that program, are you going to have individuals come to you and to be able to be mentored and
Yeah,
have
so
mentors?
yeah, so we are going to have that. There'll be like mentors. We're still sort of
Mm-hmm.
designing it, but we will sort
Yeah.
of have a first cohort. We're hoping to start September 2021. The first cohort would come through, and
Okay.
it would be a 1 year program. So there'd be
Oh,
various
nice.
workshops that would touch on different things, different
Yeah.
skills. So communication, leadership, self-care and resiliency, public speaking and
Yes.
media. Like there's so many of these
Yeah.
components that, we feel that we're really good as far as like workshops. And also we have community people who've already stepped up to be mentors.
Oh, amazing. Oh, that's
Mhm.
really, really great. So if anyone on here
Mhm.
wants to be a mentor, Rhonelle's going to be
Yes,
looking
we'll be
in
looking.
the
We'll be,
summer.
yes, we'll
Yes,
be
you're going.
posting. Like, so next year we'll be posting, we'll be sharing and stuff like that. Yeah.
Amazing. Oh, that's great. So I saw some comments that I want to look at. So while I'm looking at comments, if anyone has questions or any other comments, definitely put them in. We have Roxanne from Francis Psychotherapy saying two of my favorite women in one
Oh,
place. Thank you.
hey.
Uh, she's also saying, love that, not just a survivor. Yes, definitely, definitely. And I'm just looking up. I think I got to most of them. Okay, great. So yeah, if anyone has any questions, definitely put them in the chat. Rachel, my co-host, is there. She's going to be fielding them. Let me know what's going on. So I know, Rhonelle, you do a lot of public speaking
Mhm.
as well. And I know with Project iRISE, you've had to do kind of pivot doing the public speaking. Well, it's not really a pivot because it's still within your field and within your niche.
Yeah.
Um, for the speaking that you have done, what are some of the big questions that you get?
Oh my God, I get a lot of questions. I think I think one thing people struggle with, right? And what
Yeah,
makes human trafficking such a complex and complicated issue and crime to understand is
yeah,
that it's not people being kidnapped off the street. Like it's not what we're seeing, at least domestic sex trafficking. We're not seeing that
yeah,
very often. It's
yeah.
that relational part of it. So for people to
Mm-hmm.
understand, well, why didn't you just leave? If it, you know what
Mm-hmm.
I mean? Like if something's bad, you would just leave, you just run away, or why would you, so I think it's really hard for people to understand, but once you can sort of peel apart and understand sort of what trauma is and how trauma
Yep.
works and trauma bonds work and how manipulation and coercion works, then I
Mm-hmm.
think people can start to sort of understand how a young person could be manipulated into this situation and then how they could be fearful of actually leaving.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, no, there's so much truth there. And I think that's also part of the stigma, right? With
Yeah.
human trafficking, it's the idea that there's people who've been kidnapped. Because I think even for myself, the idea is that, oh, someone was grabbed off the street in like a white
Yeah.
van, tinted windows,
Yeah.
and sold into like sex trafficking.
Yeah.
But that's not the case. That's the
Yeah.
Hollywood.
That's the Taken, the Hollywood story. No,
Yeah,
what we
yeah.
see is it's a boyfriend or someone who seemingly they believe is their boyfriend.
Mm-hmm.
It's the girlfriend, the older
Yeah.
girl who who tells you, oh, I know easy way to make money. It's
Mm-hmm.
family,
Yeah.
it's family
Wow.
members trafficking. There, yeah. So that's what you're seeing. It's the relational.
Okay. Okay. Okay.
Yeah,
Yeah. So relational and then feeling that obligation
yeah,
because of the relationship that is had.
yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. Definitely. Definitely get it. Thank you for that. Any other questions that you tend to get? Because that's a big one, and I really like how you broke that down. Any
Yeah,
others?
I'm trying to think what else.
Yeah.
I think maybe it's a lot of piece of sort of that after, sort of how do you sort of rebuild your life after? Because a lot of times, I think a lot of, survivors struggle with that piece
Yeah.
of rebuilding your life. And I think now there's a lot more supports and services available to help, somebody rebuild
Mm-hmm.
their life. But at the end of the day, I think it comes down to you as a person. I think it's almost like I think an addict.
Yeah.
And I've never sort of been an addict or had addiction issues, but I
Yeah.
feel that like I hit rock bottom,
Yeah.
and I hit rock
Yeah.
bottom emotionally, spiritually, physically, mentally in my life. And
Yeah.
that's sort of what said to me, like, I need to change my life. Like, I need to do something to change my life because I'm not happy with the way that I'm living. This isn't the way I want to live my life. And
Mm-hmm.
that was kind of that push to do it. So you can't
Yeah.
rescue somebody. You cannot save anybody. I'm not trying to rescue or save any girls out there. That's not what I can do. You have to save yourself.
Mm-hmm.
What we can do
Mm-hmm.
is we can offer people services and programming and all the supports in the world, but it has to come from within. And a lot of times
Right.
people want to say they're going to rescue these girls, and they may rescue somebody, but you
Mm-hmm.
know what? If they haven't made that decision internally, they'll just go back.
Mm-hmm.
They'll go back to the pimp. It happens time and
Right.
time and time. They go back to the
Yep.
pimp. They go back
Yep.
to the life.
Yep.
Do you know what I mean? So it's
Yep.
not enough to just take somebody out. You have to work on
Yes.
that internal piece. They have to do
Yes.
their own healing
Yes.
inside.
Yes. 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 Yes.
Mm-hmm.
And I say that a lot in my therapy practice is that you're not there to save anyone, but you're
No.
there to help someone to understand the journey and the
Yeah.
choices that they make.
Yeah.
Right. So, and it's true. A lot of times before change happens, the hitting rock bottom has to come. And sometimes it's allowing yourself to fall and to be vulnerable enough to recognize that, oh, this is pretty bad. How can I don't want to stay here at wherever this bottom is. What can I do to change and to move forward and to rise, really? Yeah. So I saw a question. I'm just going to go back. All right, someone says, I like the word you use, re-exploitation, because it's just really speaks to not, they made a choice, it's a cycle. And
it is
I
a
think,
cycle. Yeah, it really is. It's a cycle that, because, so another thing that, oftentimes people don't talk about when it comes to sex trafficking is, there's a life. So we call it the life, or we call it the game, right? Anyone who's involved in it. And that is actually hard to leave too. So even when somebody has been removed from their trafficker, like, they've known that life, they've known their identity is associated to that life. So it's actually, there's a term for called identity disturbance. And so actually getting a survivor to sort of change that, sort of not see themselves as that person in that life, that's a whole process too. And that requires a lot of therapy and a lot of that work too. Otherwise, oftentimes they'll kind of go back. It's like it's quick money, right? So you're used to making that fast, quick money. It's like a lifestyle that can be very addictive too. And if you come out of it and you don't have means to financially support yourself and you have children, then it's very easy to go back into that life, because how else are you going to support yourself? So it's not enough, again, just to remove somebody from trafficking, because traffickers are also taking care of their needs. You know what I mean? Most traffickers, they're housing you, they're clothing you, they're feeding you. It's not, so you also need to make sure, if you're going to remove somebody from this trafficker, you're going to provide everything that they need. Because if not, I mean, they're going to go back. I mean,
Yeah. And the financial means is so true. I mean, we see that from drug dealing to robbery and things like that. There's a financial need that's there, and the financial need is taking care of those basic needs.
Yeah.
So if those basic needs are not met, or there's no plan to meet those basic needs, how do you expect people then to really heal and thrive when their basic needs are not met? Yeah. No, I love that. And it is a cycle. It is that cycle. And we know that for many abuse situations, it takes a number of times, like 5 to 7 times, for someone to try to get out before they actually can. Do you see that as well?
Yeah, no, I would say the same thing within, sex trafficking, where a lot of times, survivors, they're able to get out. But again, if that healing work hasn't been done, if their basic needs are not met, and there's not sort of that plan for their future, and everything else has been taken care of, that oftentimes they will go back. And even in the best of cases, and that stuff is done, they may go back, right? Because there's still a lot of times just that feeling of maybe you just don't belong in this new world. There's that feeling of just not, that stigma that's associated, that sticks with you, that stays with you, that shame and that guilt. And at least in that world, you didn't have to worry, because in that world, no one's judging you and no one's looking down on you. So there's even that whole piece of, like, that reintegration into the community can be very complicated and hard for some people.
Yes, I can see that. And very, like, as you said, complicated, hard, and then so painful as well. Because here it is a person who's saying, okay, I've hit rock bottom, for example, and I'm trying to do better for myself, but I'm being stigmatized and judged everywhere I go.
Yeah.
Right? So as a community, we have to be more open.
Yes, we have to. I think, and we have to be willing to have these conversations, and especially within the Black community. I think there's so many things we're dealing with in the Black community. It's like another thing to add on to it. But the reality is, it's happening. It's happening to our Black children, so it's not about we just turn our back and say, no, it is happening. So we have to have these conversations. We have to talk to our children about this, and we have to work to sort of to take away that stigma, because that's what's holding a lot of survivors back, is the stigma, especially within this community, I find.
Yes. Yeah, I agree with that 100%. There's so much stigma around different things. I mean, I see it in terms of mental health, but then it's also stigma around other things that have a huge impact on mental health and on overall well-being. I think, I think, I know in a recent interview you spoke about the importance to elevate the survivor voice. I know you touched on that a little bit, but what else do you have to say about that?
Yeah, it's just my belief that, survivors, historically have just been sort of asked to come out and share their story,
Mm-hmm.
and again, and that can
Mm-hmm.
be very empowering. So I'm not trying to take away from sharing your story, because
Yeah.
there is something about, being able to speak and sort of, share that to the world. But that's not, it shouldn't end there. Like, you have so much
Yeah.
more to offer. Survivors have so many skills and so many talents. They're subject
Mm-hmm.
matter experts. There's subject matter
Mm-hmm.
experts in trafficking. If you want to know how trafficking happens, really don't read a peer-reviewed journal. Like, you know what I mean?
It's
Ask
true.
somebody who's lived it. So people tell me, like, this
Yes.
person's an expert. I'm like, no, no, she's the expert. Trust me. Like,
Yes.
so they're experts in this space, but they just need opportunities to be able to do the work, and they need to be compensated fairly and appropriately
Mm.
for the work.
I'm gonna
I
clap you
know,
to
I know.
that.
Like, what a concept. People want to get compensated fairly.
But you know what? There's so much, and I love the fact that you mentioned about like the peer review journal, because that's
Yeah,
what we're taught, especially
I
in
know.
graduate school and things like that, right? If you're an expert, if you've written in a peer review
Yeah,
journal, and blah 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 blah. But what about your lived experience,
yeah,
where you know the ins and outs and the feelings of it, and really be able to connect with someone
yeah,
where they're at? And yes, compensation is so important, especially for women and especially for women of color. And I
yeah.
think I actually put this on my Instagram story today. So if anyone, but I think I did, because Viola Davis was talking about, oh my
Oh, I
goodness,
love her.
yes, I do too. I'm closing my eyes because I'm trying to pull the picture forward. She was talking about the gender inequality balance,
Mm,
and then she went on to talk about her as a Black woman. So then think about the gender and race inequality balance, that you need to be paid fairly for our work and our expertise. And this is something that I am speaking about more because there's so much trauma within that,
yeah,
right? Because we struggle to know our worth and imposter syndrome and all of that. If you want to have us to be there to speak and to share our stories and to draw in a crowd,
mhm,
pay us for
yeah,
that.
yeah,
Unfortunately, if it was a white male, they'll be paid. But here you have people with lived experience, people of color, women, or identify as otherwise, but not being paid for the
yeah.
expertise on the same
Yeah.
stage.
And so I just want to say, like, I come from a research background, so there is very much value in peer-reviewed literature. I don't want to take
Oh
away that.
yeah, yeah. I'm not saying
However,
there isn't.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
However, it's just the fact that, lived experience, I feel, is not given the same amount of, like, value that it should be given. And
yeah,
people who have that, who want to be able to use that to, whether it's informed services, programming, curriculum, and they
yeah,
can, and they should be able to do that. They just need to do
yeah.
it in a way that they're going to be, valued, and they're going to be compensated. And so really,
Yes.
that's what elevating the survivor voice is, and that's what
Yeah.
Project iRISE is about as well too.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah. No, for sure. There's definitely value in peer review journal, but what I'm saying is having balance for both
Yeah.
and respect for both and dignity for both.
Yes.
Right? Because definitely, I mean, I've been in journals and things that are written for journals and all of that, but I mean, you still have to have, there needs to be some balance. And I think that we're all trying to, especially from a community perspective, trying to allow that balance to be, and especially in this day and age, being able to have some fairly compensated balance for those with lived experience as well as the educational background.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. So, Rena, I know we're almost out of time. Um, Let everyone know where they can donate for Project
Yeah.
iRise.
So
Yeah.
yes, so you can go to we're on social media, so we're on all the platforms, Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn at Project iRise. And if you go within our bio, you'll see, or you go directly to our website at www.projectirise.org, and we have our GoFundMe's up. Our GoFundMe will be up for, I think, another week, and then I think that's
I
over.
think
So
it's okay.
that's the GoFundMe for the branding tattoo removal. But I mean, we'll obviously take donations after that too. So yeah, so go, check out our website, because we really cover a lot of who we are, our mission, our vision. You can see the team. We have an incredible team, an amazing board of directors. We also have an advisor committee. I haven't
Awesome.
really shared too much about them yet, because we're going to be talking about the advisory committee sort of in the coming weeks. But so we have
Yes.
such a variety of skills and talented people helping and supporting this work. And then you can see a little bit more about our services and our programming.
Amazing. And you will be looking for mentors.
Yes.
I guess summertime, summer to come,
Yeah.
so you
Well,
can get
yeah.
ready for
In the new
September.
year, yeah,
Yep.
we'll definitely be
Yeah.
reaching out to the community for that support.
Amazing. So you guys can follow Project iRise here on Instagram and on all social media platforms. Yeah. Rhonelle, thank you so much. I'm
Yeah.
glad we made time to do this. I know we're busy ladies and all, but I'm so glad that we were able to have you here on the Keep Six platform. I know I was asking you for a while because I love the work that you do. So definitely thank you for being here and thank you for supporting. And
Yes,
thank you for
no.
telling everybody about your message.
Yes, and thank you for having me on. It's I
Yeah.
remember when you came on my podcast, and we had a great conversation. I just have to say, I got such positive feedback about that. Like everyone was like, "That was the favorite episode that you did right now." So
Oh,
yeah,
nice. Oh my
yeah,
goodness.
the
Thank
great
you. Thank you. Thank
conversation on
you.
trauma that we had. Yeah,
Yes, I think it was. And you know what? As a trauma therapist, people are not talking about enough. Again, because of the stigma,
yeah,
right? Trauma is one of those things that you want to forget. People want to forget, but the people who have been through trauma and lived through trauma, we're not forgetting it,
yeah, yeah. You
right?
can't.
So let's talk about
Yeah,
it. Yeah, exactly.
yeah.
Exactly. Thank you so much,
Okay,
Rhonelle. This
all
is great.
right.
Take care.
Thank
Have a good
you.
night.
Bye.
Bye. So everyone, that was Rhonelle Bruder. She is the executive of Project iRISE. Yeah, great conversation tonight. Also, I want to let you know Keep Six is doing some really great things. We are having a virtual Christmas concert on December 12th. We are also looking for donations for that. We've had a number of corporate donations, so thank you everyone who has donated. Thank you to those who are going to be on the concert. We have a number of performers that are going to be there. We're having some premiere videos that night too, so you definitely want to check it out. That is going to be December 12th. Keep locked on to our social media, to our Instagram, Facebook, and others. If you have questions, if you want to donate, my co-host Rachel is the person to go to. She is going to give you all the information and definitely something that you definitely need to be at. So Keep Six virtual Christmas concert. It's going to be December 12th. So everyone, take care. Good night. I'm Natasha Pennycook. Don't forget to join us next week at 7. Rachel is going to be on interviewing Tyler, I believe. So that's going to be another amazing conversation. So make sure that you are locked on next Wednesday, same time, same place, right here on Instagram, 7 o'clock. Take care, everyone. Have a good night. Bye.